Welcome to the SBI Podcast, offering CEOs, sales and marketing leaders ideas to make the number.
Welcome SBI listeners, readers, and viewers. My name is Greg Alexander, and I'm the CEO of SBI, a management consulting firm specializing in sales and marketing dedicated to helping you make your number. This is the weekly SBI podcast, and its purpose is to help you make your number by getting your peers to share with you how they make theirs. Today's guest is Scott Tapp, and he is the Executive Vice President of Global Sales, Marketing, and Field Operations at PGI. PGI is the world's largest dedicated provider of collaboration software and services and is the maker of iMeet. Scott, welcome to the show.
Hey, Greg. Thanks for having me.
All right. On today's show, Scott and I are going to discuss sales execution. And we're going to use an article from the SBI magazine titled The 8 Disciplines of Sales Execution, authored by SBI's very own Ryan Tognazzini. And if I say so myself, it is required reading for any sales leader who wants flawless sales execution in the field. If you want a copy of it, go to salesbenchmarkindex.com/the SBI magazine. All right, this show is broken down into 3 segments. In segment 1, we will discuss the first 3 of the 8 disciplines of sales execution. In segment 2, we will discuss disciplines 4 through 6. And in segment 3, we'll finish off with discussions around disciplines 7 and 8. All right, so let's jump into it and get Scott's thoughts on disciplines 1 through 3. So Scott, let me jump in and ask you some questions regarding discipline 1, which is a concept called the hierarchy of objectives, and which is meant to allow an organization to cascade high-level corporate objectives such as revenue and EBITDA targets into field-level objectives such as sales rep quotas. So how do you connect the goals of the CEO and the board to the individual sales rep in the field?
Yeah, Greg, great question. I tell you, this one's super important for us, and it's a big topic, especially with a lot of things that we've been doing and a great deal of change in our business over the last 60 days. For instance, we've actually gone from being a public company to a private company. We've had a great deal of management change in my team, a new CEO, update to strategy, go-to-market updates, just a great deal of stuff happening all the while as we're kicking off our new year and making sure that everyone's clear, they have operating goals, and we all know exactly where we're pointing and where we're going. So super important topic. From my perspective, I look at alignment in 2 critical ways. One is taking, if you think about the board, messaging, strategy, and everything we're doing, how do we align all of that out to the organization? And two important parts for us. One is applying constant communication. Secondly is aligning compensation that drives the behavior to help us execute on the key goals that we have. So let me just dive into these just for a minute, if you don't mind. On the communications front, this is super critical as it relates to making sure communication is relevant for the individual. For instance, we create relevant content for everyone that affects the business, such as a product person or a marketing person, sales or service management or whatever area they are in. If the comms are too broad, it tends to go over their head, or they don't stay. It's not relevant for them, so they don't get anything out of it. So it's super important that it's really relevant. Now, for us, we're fortunate to be in the collaboration software business, so we use and have a lot of tools available to us. So frankly, there's no excuse for us not to be communicating with the people in our organization. So with that, we use those technologies. I have, for instance, biweekly all-hands global call with about 600 folks, and we use our webcast technology to broadcast and update personally for me. And we do this, and we record it, and it also allows people to review it on a later, at a later time and anytime they can. And then we also, on a regular basis, we leverage our iMeet Accelerator platform, which is a ability to record a video and a presentation and audio and actually send it out to our audience. So, for instance, our marketing and sales enablement teams can send quick recorded updates on sales plays, or product updates, or training areas, and highlight key wins or whatever it may be. And then it has analytics that allow us to actually make sure that people have watched it and know that they've watched the recording, and we're making sure that our communication's going out and people are getting it. And then we also actually leverage things like text messaging. So, taking objectives and strategy and sending out quick, short, did you know messages or contests about things that we want people to be focused and thinking about. So those are the big communication areas for me that are super critical. And then the second thing that I mentioned, and lastly, is compensation. And I would say it's probably one of the most important things is aligning compensation goals with strategy. And so we set targets that reward our sales professionals for running the plays we line up and selling our most strategic products. And you can do this by clearly turning on or down levers in the sales compensation and compensation areas for all your employees. Okay. And those are the big areas for us.
Very good. All right, let's move on to discipline number 2, which is converting objectives, like we just discussed, into KPIs and then reporting on them on a regular basis to keep track of daily progress. Many companies that we work with use things like a stoplight report, which allows them to simply color code things red, yellow, green, which makes it really easy to kind of keep track of this discipline. So how do you track daily progress against objectives?
Yeah, so we're in the software as a service business, so our platforms are always on and they're real time and always running. So, tracking daily, frankly, even real time stats and KPIs are critical to us. So from the operations side of our business, we look at real time, uptime indicators, service levels, care and support KPIs, and then that goes all the way across to our finance group where we actually track daily cash flow balances, so you can imagine staying pretty disciplined on daily activity for everything that we do in the core operational side. And then on my side of the business in the sales, marketing, field ops world, critical daily indicators for me are things like implementation stats from our implementation usage and adoption team, understanding, onboarding of customers and how that's going to impact our revenue. And then also the service management team and customer success teams for me are making sure that I have a daily view on customer impacts. We benchmark how many customer impacts we could or may have, and then we look at those on a daily basis to see where we are. And then last, I think on the sales front, we've been reading up on some of the SBI best practices, and you guys have actually been helping us put together key KPIs that we can view on a regular basis that are things like cross-sell, upsell indicators for us, where that's a big focus in our business. We look at pipeline creation on a regular basis. We look at things that measure anything against our strategic objectives. One of the other big areas we look that for me on a regular basis, and not so much daily, it's probably more along the lines of weekly, are and very much red, yellow, green indicators are cadence and reports on our core top customers. So across the world, I have about 20 line managers who manage books of business, and every one of those line managers have a top 25 customer, and we're expecting every week that they're working with their line manager, working with their reps, and we're having conversations with our customers, and we're updating this report that says, are our customers in a green spot, a yellow spot, or a red spot? And if they're green, we're working on go to plans to get them to yellow, and if they're yellow, we're working on plans to go to green. And this is something we produce every week worldwide. I'll look at it. It'll have about 70% of our entire close to $600 million revenue represented in these top customers, and it's a real healthy benchmark for us to look at our current base every week.
Okay, great. All right, so far we've talked about the first 2 steps in the 8 steps of sales execution, the discipline of sales execution. Let's move on to the next discipline of sales execution, which is the daily Scrum, which Scott just started to ease into, but let's talk about a little bit more depth here. And this is where every sales rep commits to a set of actions every day that moves the ball forward against the objectives that have now been laid out and cascaded. So Scott, how do you drive the daily behavior of each salesperson? I know your job is much broader than sales, but the purpose of this podcast is sales. So if I could ask you to answer that question directly about individual salespeople, that'd be great.
Yeah, so, we think about this, and I personally expect the sales line managers in the field and around the world to be communicating, coaching, and driving their reps' activity on a daily basis. I mean, we actually have weekly cadence for our sales team, so they know exactly what they're doing every Monday, every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And our sales leaders and line managers are, following that cadence with their reps on a daily basis. And not only that, it actually starts on Sunday, where we have them thinking about, okay, what am I going to accomplish this week, and what do I need to do every single day to make sure I'm accomplishing our goals.
Okay. All right, very helpful. We need to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to dive into disciplines 4 through 6, so stick around after the break.
Do you have too many things to do and not enough time to do them? Is finding time to learn best practices almost impossible? The SBI podcast is your solution. Turn time spent exercising, commuting, and traveling into productive learning time with a subscription to the SBI podcast. SBI podcast listeners get unique insight into real-world sales and marketing issues through interviews with your industry peers every week. Find us on iTunes by searching for Sales Benchmark Index Podcast and subscribe today.
Welcome back. My name is Greg Alexander, and I am the CEO of SBI. And my guest today is Scott Tapp, Executive Vice President, Global Sales Marketing and Field Ops at PGI. Today we are discussing the 8 disciplines of sales execution, and we're using an article from the SBI magazine titled The 8 Disciplines of Sales Execution, which is authored by SBI's Ryan Tognazzini. You can get a copy at salesbenchmarkindex.com/SBI magazine. Before the break, Scott and I discussed disciplines 1 through 3, and during this segment, we're going to discuss disciplines 4 through 6. So Scott, let's jump back into it and talk about discipline number 4, which is the weekly sales meeting, which we started talking about in the last segment when you talked about your frontline sales manager. But our definition, for the benefit of the audience, is the weekly meeting typically lasts about an hour, and its purpose is to fix the issues that come up during the daily huddles. And the goal is for the sales manager to knock down obstacles standing in the way of the reps making their numbers. So how do your frontline managers remove the obstacles, preventing your sales team from success each and every week?
Yeah, so another good question. My sales leadership team, including myself, we have a weekly call. Typically, depending on the person's style, they'll be every Monday or Friday. We try to, for me personally, I kick off my call every Monday morning. We go through recurring themes and things from the previous week. It could be win-loss deals. It could be anything that we picked up, customer successes, plays that we ran that were successful for a certain reason, and everyone shares some of the best practices of things that we closed from the previous week. And then we also identify any challenges, and then we also start really thinking about the week ahead of us and exactly what we're going to do and what we're trying to accomplish, major customer opportunities that we're trying to drive to closure and deals and things of that extent. But it's also, what happens is as we have these weekly calls, we identify certain things, and over a course of a week or two, we'll often pick up a theme. And a theme could be, hey, we need to, we're not having much luck with this product or with this play or with talking to this line of business. So we'll have the opportunity to bring in a guest speaker. And every week we'll try to bring in someone in the back half for the last 15 minutes of a meeting that can help us drive a training exercise or help us drive some type of information that's going to be important for the group and to the group. Okay. So it helps us bring people in to create alignment and make sure people understand what's going on in the business. It's really good.
So fantastic. So we're in the weeds here. We're talking about sales execution, and that's what it takes. So we're hearing an autopsy on Scott's communication cadence. I love the idea of a guest speaker on the weekly meeting. All right, let's take ourselves to discipline number 5, which is the monthly meeting. So we went daily, weekly, now we're monthly. And our definition for the benefit of the audience, and then we'll hear Scott's implementation of this is a half-day session with the executive leadership team now, meant to keep each function in alignment. So picture the CEO sitting around the table with the product leader, the marketing leader, the sales leader, the finance leader, the HR leader, etc. So Scott, how do you work with your functional peers to make sure they're giving you what you need to make the number, and then vice versa, you're giving them what they need to be successful?
Yeah, it's a good one. So, we are monthly face-to-face. It's actually a monthly meeting, but I actually insist that it's face-to-face. So my teams all over the world, as you can imagine, we all come together, and it's a pretty standard cadence, right? We cover financials, we cover where we ended up from the prior month, where we are to plan. We look at expenses to plan, and we have a readout from each one of the functional leaders on where they are in performance and goals for that year. For this year, it's pretty exciting as we've made a lot of changes, and new for us, we've introduced product line managers. Many of them have their own functional responsibility, but they're responsible for understanding and driving the strategy of our 8 main product lines. And these folks are looking over market trends and opportunities, and they work with product manager and future roadmaps and all kinds of things to that extent. So we're now putting in place a discipline where we're taking every month the reports and scorecards from each product level, and we're broadcasting that into our functional groups. And we're actually sitting down saying, okay, look at the KPIs and the goals that we had. If it's, this benchmark or pipeline benchmark or cross-sell, upsell benchmark, and how did we do and what do we need to do to improve? And it's not only is it my organization and the sales, marketing, and field ops, but we also bring in these product line managers so it creates great alignment and everyone knows exactly where we are on to plan. And with that, you can drive execution strategies to know where you need to turn some dials to get better, or where you're having success and you keep doubling down on the success that you're having.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, let's progress to discipline number 6, which is the quarterly business review, sometimes affectionately known in the software business as the QBR. Our definition, again, for what it's worth, is that this is typically a 2-day off-site meeting led by the CEO, whose purpose is to iterate the company's strategy based on the market feedback from the last 90 days. So one of the challenges with corporate strategy is it sits on the shelf until it gets updated every year. And we believe that the QBR is a good way for the functional leaders, particularly sales and marketing, to drive into the CEO market feedback and iterate the strategy. So, Scott, how does your company rapidly iterate its strategy at a corporate level each quarter based on feedback from groups such as your customers, your prospects, your employees, and your competitors?
Yeah, so strategically for us, this one's been a big topic, our QBRs and how to make our QBRs more effective over the last few years. And one of the big turns for us is making sure that we're getting closer to our customers. So what I mean by that is, as you look at our strategic discussions that we have, if it's product roadmaps, strategy, we're trying to focus on driving all the feedback we can from our customers. And the folks in our organization, while they all have great ideas and we all have great ideas, our goal is to make sure that our customers are actually coming up with the ideas that drive into our organization for product enhancements and other things. So part of that cadence is getting out in front of customers and channeling feedback into the organization. And this is a big focus for us, right? Making sure that we have clear communication back from customers into product, into marketing, and into the main function areas of the business. So what we do for our QBRs is we actually have a segment within the QBRs that read out from our marketing, product teams, and others of what our customers are saying. And we'll sit with the CEO and we'll sit with all the functional leaders, and they get to talk about the customer feedback that we're getting, the positive, the negative, the areas that they're seeing in the market, the things that they want us to do to drive that feedback. This is also, we've gone as far as to create an advisory council and customer advisory boards where our teams are getting together with our customers every quarter, and we sit down and we listen and we plan with our customers, and then we take all the feedback from that and then we push that back into our quarterly business reviews that, again, where our cross-functional leaders are, and helps us understand how our business is doing, and most importantly, how our business is doing around our customers. So those are key for us.
Fantastic. Pay attention, listeners. If you don't execute disciplines 4 through 6, like Scott just demonstrated for you, you will be working for a company who gets left in the dust because you can't keep up with change, especially if you're in the technology industry. Let's break for a second and come back to discuss the final 2 disciplines. You're listening to the SBI podcast. Back in a bit.
Each day, you receive hundreds of emails, tons of text messages, countless telephone calls, and sit in too many meetings. How do you find ideas to make the number with all this noise? The SBI blog filters all this nonsense for you. and presents only first-rate ideas to make the number. Simplify your life. Subscribe to one blog and read the best content. Go to salesbenchmarkindex.com and subscribe today.
Welcome back, everybody. My name is Greg Alexander. My guest today is Scott Tapp. Today we are discussing sales execution, probably a topic near and dear to everyone's hearts right now. In segment 1 of this show, we discussed disciplines 1 through 3, and in segment 2, we discussed disciplines 4 through 6. This is the last segment of this show, so we're going to discuss disciplines 7 and 8. So Scott, discipline number 7 is the annual planning process. And the purpose of the annual planning process, at least according to our point of view, is to develop the annual operating plan, which for sales leaders involves things like naming the number for the year, determining headcount, comp plans, quotas, territories, things like that. So how do you folks handle the annual planning process?
Yeah, so our actual annual planning process starts at the beginning of every new year. We literally kick it off in March, and we find ourselves in an offsite with the key executives in the organization, and we start thinking about, we've gotten through the end of the year, we've launched an operating plan. We start thinking about what we need to grow our business and accomplish into the next year. So we're always trying to stay well ahead of it. We'll start in March with key themes and topics with an offsite, and then we get back together in the middle of the summer. And in the summer, we go through the same thing. What are we learning? Almost like the quarterly review, but we're thinking about the next year all the time, right? During these particular meetings, and we get great benefits from these things because we've seen things like outcomes. If I can give you an example, 4 years ago, where we're in the middle of this planning process, and we realized what our industry's doing, our market, and we decided to launch our SaaS business. And from that, we took an execution to the board where, we drive our process through the summer all the way up to an operating plan that we try to put in place in September. And then we're getting approval and meeting with the board in November on exactly what we want to do and how we want to do it and approving the budgets for the next year. Well, 4 years ago during this process, we identified a need to shift our business from just a services business and usage-based to more of a SaaS, predictable financial business and SaaS model. And by focusing on that and having that year thinking about where we're going, it allowed us to launch the SaaS business. We're 4 years into it with over a $100 million run rate within the business, and it's been very successful. We're doing that. We launched the business. We put the board plan and the approval together, and then we take that and you think about, all right, now you got to run comp plans, you got to run targets, and you got to create targets per channel. So our partner channel target, our field channel target, and our inside sales channel. And then that will drive everything that we need to do from the products we're launching, how we're launching them, and in what channels and to what customers based on segments that we specialize in. With that, the change starts to drive things like talent development. Do you need new people based on selling new services? So when we launched our SaaS business, the conversation was different. The customer communications were different. So we had to bring in a new organization. And you saw us turn over the course of a period of 2 years about 60% of our organization, believe it or not, where we knew that we had to shift into a new type of business and a new model. So that yearly planning process starts early in the year, takes us through the end of the year, through a board meeting, and then we kick off. We just started kicking off this year, and then we're already starting to think about getting ready for 2017 right now.
Okay, fantastic. All right, we've covered the first 7 disciplines. Just to rewind the clock a little bit, we went daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually after we set some goals. We're now going to talk about discipline number 8, which is the multi-year strategic planning process. A definition and the benefit. The purpose of the multi-year strategic planning process is to build a rolling 3-year plan, and in it, companies decide on things such as big strategic issues like which markets should we compete in and why? What products should we invest in and why? What's our competitive positioning versus our top 3 competitors? What are our objectives really going to be? I mean, who do we want to be when we grow up? What's our reason for existence? Why are we doing what we're doing? What's our brand promise to our customers? How are we going to serve our customers? These big multi-year strategic planning processes. So, Scott, something tells me you're going to have a great answer here, because your answer regarding the annual planning process was fantastic. So how do you and your executive team handle the multi-year strategic planning process at PGI?
Well, Greg, I'm a little worried I'm going to let you down on this one.
Okay.
Because I do feel like we're pretty solid on our regular cadence and planning, but this is an area where I think we just need improvement. We do sit down and we think about a long-term plan, but as opposed to sitting down and really assessing in one time frame, studying, okay, here's the market and here's what we're doing, and let's put out a 3 or 5 year plan. It really goes back to that cadence that I mentioned earlier on our annual planning process, getting together at the beginning of every year, getting together in the summer, getting ready for our board meetings. That's where all these things come up and the ideas we create come up. And, it kind of takes us into the next year. For the last however many years, 17 plus years, we've been a public company. So as a public company, clearly you're looking at quarterly results. Annual results are important, but we're running to quarterly results. So I think we've been somewhat short-term focused, if you will. Now that we've gone private, we've actually started thinking about creating an actual formal strategic committee where we get together on a regular basis with our private equity firm, with the senior management of the company, to more formally document where we are in our strategy, where we are in a 3-year plan, and what our goals are going forward. So I can't tell you we're actually doing a good job today, but talk to me in about 9 months to a year, and I'll let you know how we're doing then.
Well, life inside of a privately owned business now affords you the luxury to do that. Unfortunately, and I spent lots of my career at EMC Corporation, and we were public, and God help you if you missed the quarterly EPS number. So I feel your pain, and I'm glad I'm glad you got a chance here with a new financial sponsor and strategic partner to rethink that. So, all right, let's do a little quick summary. Today we're talking about the 8 disciplines of sales execution, and we're out of time. But what you just heard there from Scott at PGI is how to set goals, how to cascade things like corporate goals, board level goals, CEO level goals, down to functional teams in marketing and sales and product, HR, etc. Then how to run a cadence. And this is the discipline. I know we're talking about the 8 disciplines of sales execution. I want to draw a line under the word discipline. Daily huddles that bubble up issues to the weekly meeting, that bubble up issues to the monthly meeting, that become the material for the quarterly business review, that become part of the annual planning process, and ultimately the 3-year multi-year planning process. So if you're not doing something like that, our experience, for what it's worth, is you're going to underperform against your potential. You might get by this year, but you're more likely to make the year one year, miss the number the next. Make the number one year, miss the number the next. And from my perspective, that's no way to live. So if you should be managing your career for the long term, thinking decades. And this type of discipline is what allows you to do that. So unfortunately, we're out of time. I'm passionate about this subject. I could talk to you about it forever. And Scott, I really want to thank you for letting me interview you. You were my lab rat today. Your answers were fantastic. And the people that are listening and watching and reading this got a better chance of being successful as a result. So thanks a bunch for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Greg. I really appreciate it.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed the show. If you want to improve your sales execution, audience, consider having one of our experts help you implement the 8 disciplines of sales execution. So how do you do that? You can go to salesbenchmarkindex.com, fill out the Contact Us form, and we'll send somebody to see you. It's pretty easy. Until next time, I wish you good luck as you try to make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on SBI services, case studies, the SBI team and how we work, or to subscribe to our other offerings, please visit us at salesbenchmarkindex.com.